All right, ladies and gentlemen, I understood the coffee break was short, but hopefully effective. I hope that you enjoyed the two keynote presentations. And as mentioned, right now we would like to debate. We have two panelists who are online with us. So once again, we have Peter Berkovitz. You remember Peter represents a very important team with DG Regio, and he will try to listen and then will react to the comments on the 8th Cohesion Report. And also with us, we have Dragos Pislaru, who is the member of the European Parliament and chair of the Committee on Employment and Social Affairs, and he was also Minister for Labour, the Family, Social Welfare and the Elderly in Romania, and has a full career in the private sector and academia, and Mr. Pislaru is online with us. So welcome, sir. Stefano Palmieri, who we have a pleasure of having here in presence with us. He is the president of the section on Economic and Monetary Union and Economic and Social Cohesion of the European Economic and Social Committee. And your section is following the policy areas of EU budget and cohesion. So you are the most competent person to also give us your views, of course, on the cohesion report. We have Thomas Woben, and Thomas Woben is a friend of ESPON for many years. Thomas is Director for Legislative Works with the Committee of the Regions, and his directorate coordinates the work on territorial cohesion, economic policy, education, employment, culture, also cross-border cooperation and territorial partnerships. And we are really, really glad of having Eugenia Maruniak with us, who is Director and Head of Sustainable Development and Environmental Assessment section of the Institute of Geography at the National Academy of Sciences in Ukraine. And Eugenia has also been a member of the ESPON IRIE project team. And then, last but not least, Filip Cichowlas, who is the Head of European Cohesion Policy Unit at the National Agency of the Territorial Cohesion. And he was the one, of course, to open today's event. And because, Philip, you have some constraints, I think we'll start with you directly. Your reflections on what Peter was saying about the cohesion report and the state of cohesion in Europe. Could you give us some very short telegraphic snapshots, please?
Thank you very much. Effectivement, ce que Peter Berkovitz a très bien mis en lumière, mais les intervenants précédents aussi ce matin, c'est toute la difficulté pour l'Union européenne dans son ensemble d'être en capacité de répondre à des crises conjoncturelles d'une gravité sans précédent depuis de nombreuses années, alors même que son fonctionnement et que le fonctionnement de l'Union européenne est plus basé sur une approche structurelle et pluriannuelle. On vote un budget pour 7 ans, avec des règlements pour 7 ans. Mais en même temps, on a bien vu ces derniers mois, ces dernières années, qu'il a fallu adapter ces règles en permanence pour s'adapter à la crise structurelle. On l'a vu avec le CRI, le premier instrument d'adaptation des programmes 14-20 à la crise du Covid, avec REACT-EU, la partie, je dirais, relance de la politique de cohésion et du plan de relance, de la facilité de relance et de résilience. On l'a vu après, plus récemment avec CARE, avec la crise ukrainienne en ce début d'année, qui a beaucoup occupé le Conseil et la Commission. On le voit maintenant avec REPowerEU, avec la crise énergétique. Jamais on n'avait vu autant d'adaptation des règles communautaires à des problématiques conjoncturelles, mais en même temps, ces problématiques conjoncturelles, comme toujours en matière d'économie régionale, affectent généralement les régions les moins développées, les territoires les moins développés. Et on sait très bien que les périodes de croissance réduisent les disparités territoriales, alors que les périodes de crise les accroissent. Et c'est toute cette contradiction qu'il va falloir gérer, cette difficulté qu'il va falloir gérer pour concevoir la politique régionale post-27. Comment avoir une politique régionale qui garde le cap sur les grands objectifs et les grands investissements nécessaires à la cohésion territoriale de l'Union, et en même temps la rendre suffisamment habile pour qu'elle puisse s'adapter à ces crises structurelles. Et c'est tout le défi, je crois, que vont avoir tous les décideurs publics pour les années à venir. Désolé de devoir vous quitter. Merci.
Thank you very much. I have a second question to Mr. Palmieri. Sorry, I would reverse a bit the presentation here and maybe start with to have a sort of a symmetry between the people in the studio and people online. Mr. Pislaru, you are an economist yourself. This is what we know. And also the chair of the Social Affairs Committee at the Parliament. You have definitely a very good overview of how to implement the social policies, what the effectiveness of the social policies have been. Could you tell us a bit about how Europe address, from your perspective, the challenges that you might have followed through the series of presentations during the day-to-day, and also based on your experience? Can we become really more resilient, socially resilient, and autonomous from external crises or dependencies? What's your view on that?
First of all, I'm a good friend of Espen myself. I've been working and even teaching in the past on neo-economic geography and issues that deals with spatial economics. So indeed, also with my PhD thesis on cluster theory and implementation and industrial policy, I'm really glad, and I insisted a lot to be part of this session and conference. So big congrats for organizing this event. Now, indeed, the thing is that when we started to talk about cohesion, we started with economic cohesion, then social cohesion, then territorial cohesion. But it's still somehow considered to be three different things. So economic, it's about macro and stuff, and then social, it's about social issues and affairs, and then the territorial component, it's having nice maps. And I think that one of the lessons that we are learning these days, especially after the COVID-19 shock and the recent war shock. I think it's that the interdependency in between these realms of study and analysis and implementation, it's crucial. So I was really glad to hear and to see that in the strategic foresight report of the Commission of last year that had the four dimensions, the economic and social dimension was taken together. So the underpinning that growth cannot be without the social impact. That was for me a very important part. Now, if we are to talk about social resilience, that for me as an economist, the most important part is why is that important for the economic growth? And indeed, Espen work and the kind of work that you put together shows this clear differentiation of development. And while we can certainly see that there is a progress because of the cohesion funds and so on in 2020, the impact of COVID has changed radically the way we look at the territorial aspect. And why I'm saying that? Because it was very, very clear when we had this symmetric shock because of COVID. It was very, very clear that the vulnerability was not symmetric as well, in the sense that there were, from a territorial viewpoint, there were areas that were by far more vulnerable than others. And that's just normal. And I will take into account, for instance, the idea of administrative capacity. And I will focus a little bit on the health issue, just to be very, very clear. So the capacity to respond in terms of the health services has varied tremendously across Europe. And we have seen that the regions and the territories that were poor in terms of administrative capacity and health services had really a big problem. And now the coordinated response at the European Union level has helped tremendously with the vaccines and equipment and so on and so forth. So we see right now how important is the coordination part in order to reach a better response for those areas that are more vulnerable. Now, the lessons that we've incorporated with that were somehow expressed in instruments such as the RRF, Government Resilience Facility. And I think that this shows that we have right now a different understanding of an integrated response that will allow not only investment, so giving the money, but also attaching the reforms. and that's improving the whole semester concept and the entire approach in terms of governance at EU level. So just to sum up what I'm trying to say is that we started with a standardized and a model that worked well with the cohesion money to help areas, regions catch up. And we are reaching right now an understanding that we need ownership at member states level. We need this combo of reforms and investment. We need to understand better that we need a balanced approach in terms of how economic, social, and territorial aspects are coming together with the two main transformations that we are pushing forward, climate and digitalization. And just to conclude this idea, I really believe that the concept of social resilience nowadays, it's not just about trying to come up with redistribution of welfare and so on and so forth. It's about investment. And that's actually the thing that I wanted to insist on. So right now, if we want to have an impact in terms of the territorial development perspective, we really need to invest in people, broadly speaking. But more importantly, I think that today, given the fact that it's the 1st of June, it suits me very well to insist on investment in children. And I think that if you put together the way in which we respond to shocks, and also the demography part that has two components, migration and displacement that we've seen as a result of the war in Ukraine, and then the fertility and natality parts, we really need to focus a lot on access and opportunity for the next generation, for youth and children. And that has been reflected, and I've been a rapporteur on the Recovery and Resilience Facility, and I insisted on the pillar on children and youth. And this is right now quintessential in terms of implementing programs such as the Child Guarantee or the Youth Guarantee revamped. And these things are really critical. So they are not just things that will be put in a silo policy. I mean, this is a social label thing. These are really critical in terms of what perspectives are we going to give for economic development? What perspectives are we going to give for access and opportunity in terms of social? And this will have a tremendous impact on how the territorial development will look like. So I will stop here. There are a lot of ideas that I can expand, but that's the most important thing. Social resilience should not be put in a box and labeled social and to be dealt by a DG or a particular committee in the parliament. This is a quintessential part of territorial and economic development as well. And it should be integrated and seen as a combo for the future. And the key word there is investment. And in my view, especially in the next generation, in order to be sure that we are actually out of the vicious circle. And second, that we understand the lessons of resilience. That's the capacity to adapt and fare better when we have shocks at the EU level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Piślaru. That's a very important statement about the social resilience and absolutely not any desire to put a policy in a box. And I think, again, because, in ESPON, we want to think more in terms of territorial governance, reducing the impact of administrative boundaries. This is, of course, the melody to our program years, if I can put it that way. Mr. Palmieri, how to invest in people? This is a crucial question because your committee has recently published an opinion on the 8th Cohesion Report, and you said that more than 120 million people are at the risk of poverty and social exclusion because of the pandemic, and then additional 6 million refugees from Ukraine that add pressure on the EU socio-economic systems. Are we equipped in order to cope with that? How do you see the role of the civil society in that? How we can invest in people to strengthen the social resilience? Any advice you can give us, please?
First of all, thanks for the invitation and good morning to everybody. To reply to your question, I would use some interesting results that came from your analysis. The Next Generation EU is one of the large mobilization of the EU funds, but is not still sufficient to compensate the largest economic shock experienced from the different regions in the European Union. And the second point is the link with some distribution criteria of the program that could widen the regional difference with some problem for the EU cohesion. I think that in your last thematic report, one of the key policy messages written in this paper is that public bodies should strategically improving practices, tools and regulation that will benefit citizens and will also allow policymakers and stakeholders to react even more efficiently in future crisis situations. I think that this is linked to what the Professor Mazzucato said before, and also Mr. Berkovitz when he spoke about the trap for some region. We need multi-governance, and in this multi-governance there is an important role for the stakeholder, civil society organization and social partner. And I think that we need to improve the partnership principle that is very good experienced in the cohesion policy, with a real involvement of social partner and civil society organization, because are these people, these key actors that leave the problem in the regions. For this reason, there are some key points, and one of these is education and long life learning. If we want a real transition to the digital economy and green economy, we need to readapt our workforce, and we need to more investment in education and long life learning for all citizens. In this way, no one will left behind, and in this way we combat the blah blah economy that Mrs. Mazzucato said before.
So breaking the silos, and I think, Thomas, for you and your works, your long-standing experience with public policy, this is a crucial question of breaking the silos, forcing or enforcing multi-level governance for the public policies. But what your reaction is about the divides that you have seen stemming from the report, the cohesion report, but also report that Carlos was so kind to present in the morning. Some persist, some are even growing. How then to strengthen the effectiveness of the policies in addressing those so that no one and no place is left behind? Your opinion, please.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for inviting me here. It is fascinating, this discussion we had. And I want to maybe approach it from three different angles. One is, of course, the cohesion report clearly shows that cohesion is working, but that challenges remain, particularly at the regional side. Cohesion has been the first policy to respond to the crisis. As Mariana said, there was not much, but cohesion was there. So we are today in a better state with cohesion than 10 years ago, when in the financial crisis cohesion failed because it was not able to respond. And of course, but there are also challenges. And there I come to the second point, and I wanted to reply to what the two speakers said before, Mariana Mazzucato and also the research presented here from the colleague from Spain. We have to come out of the comfort zone with cohesion. We spoke a lot about challenges and missions. This is the new approach, the Green Deal, the RRF, the digital transition. It can become a very top-down agenda with little room of maneuver on the ground if the money is connected with conditionalities and no true bottom-up is there. And even so, it's in the concept, it hasn't really been developed properly. There is always a reference to, yes, the capacity has to be on the ground, but when you look at the 100 cities which were recently selected for the cities mission, or many other things, it's always the same group of cities and regions who are the front runners. It's the Basque, it's the Catalans, it's the Baden-Württembergs, it's some others, the Scottish, and so forth. If we really want to approach, to leave no one behind, we have to do a rethinking how we get the capacity on the ground, how do we invest there. And we have the idea on smart specialization, for example, as a capacity building process to manage the transition on the ground. And we need to combine that with directionality. And that's what we're trying, for example, with the recently launched pilot action with 70 regions on partnerships for regional innovation. The second thing is do no harm to cohesion. The cohesion report clearly says we should check that no policy should harm cohesion. Cohesion is an overall value of the EU. But what do we do to prevent that policies are harming cohesion, including social cohesion? I give an example. We have all the transition in the green transition, but this green transition has impacts on different regions, particularly regions. And how far is this on the agenda? And connected to this is also transition and democracy. Because we have urban-rural divide, but also we have the divide between the somewheres and the anywheres. Those who want to stay and demand that jobs come to them, and those who see the world as their home. And I think we have to address that as well. And the last point I want to make is on resilience and decentralization, especially because I have the honor sitting next to somebody from Ukraine. The invasion of Russia in Ukraine has also shown how important decentralization and local leadership is. And this is my personal comment. I would say Ukraine's fight is also the fight of the mayors in Ukraine, and we need to strengthen the local democracy in order to ensure that the transition has been managed, but also that the resistance is there. Not only we can learn from the Ukraine situation, also for our transition, that we have to strengthen local democracy, because if not, we will have the results we had in votings recently, and that we should not forget. The transition is a challenge, but the democracy is another challenge, and we have to bring them together, and cohesion is the instrument to bring these together.
Thomas, thank you very much. The matter of leadership, local democracy, participatory approach is very important indeed, and we also emphasize it in many ESPON reports, that in order to run the purposeful mission and changing the structures to respond to the challenges based on mission, then of course we need leaders, and we need also the culture of trust and confidence. Eugenia, if I can then ask you about your personal opinion. We've seen a presentation by Carlos about the different scenarios. What, according to your personal view, is the most realistic scenario? What we should do in terms of the European policies in order to address the impacts of that worst scenario you might envisage? If you can share your thoughts with us, please.
Yes, I also want to say thank you for invitation, and definitely in the framework of this area project, together with colleagues, we developed and explained 4 main scenarios for refugee inflows regarding war in Ukraine. And the first one is was built on the assumption that it's short and with low damage, so short and soft, let me say. The second is long and soft. The third one is short but with significant damage. And finally, the fourth one is the worst, scenario D, which is long and with major destruction. And trying to forecast and analyzing current situation, I would rather say that the first 2 soft are more probable. Maybe with certain corrections of their duration. I mean, short could be a bit longer and long could be a bit shorter. But anyway, in this case, Ukraine will need certain and different types of support on behalf of European Union, both to encourage economic recovery and also, let me say, to provide the basis for improving of living condition, to make people come back, to make people stay in Ukraine. And what I mean here, it's, for instance, support for different framework spatial development strategies, not only financial, but also advisory assistance, including monitoring of the implementation of such strategies. And what was already mentioned, it's about local development. We really need support to certain communities, cities, for rehabilitation of territories, for revitalization of urban space. And previously, Ukraine had certain experience with such a program like You Lead with Europe. So probably this program and other types of programs would be quite beneficial for Ukraine for its future. And it's also would be a bad idea to forget about two another scenarios, C and D. So anyway, we need the kind of draft action plan in case they come true. But I hope it never happens, but nevertheless.
Let's hope so indeed. Thank you very much. Advisory on strategies for local development. So this is very important to create frameworks for bouncing forwards. This is the motto that I liked a lot, not to bounce back to the pre-pandemic or pre-crisis state, but to bounce forward, learn, capitalize, reap some benefits in the way we should react to the future crises. Peter, when listening to these different statements, if I may just poke you a little bit, how to make the cohesion policy bounce forward based on the information, the advice, the results of different analyses you've both produced yourselves in the team, but also that you might have heard from ESPON and many other sources. What's your reflections are, please?
Well, thank you very much. And I think that your question very well summarizes the discussion. And the discussion has struck me very much about the notion of resilience. And I think the interesting question is, under what conditions can we ensure that regions and cities are resilient? Because one of the lessons that I think we have drawn from the crisis is that the return to normality does not follow a uniform pathway. This is something which is known well in labor economics. But regions get hit by a crisis, and together with other factors, this creates new problems. We saw this particularly in relation to the economic and financial crisis, which set some regions back much more than others. And I think there, the point about social resilience and its link with economic resilience is essential, because it's not just about structures, it's about people. And I think that this notion of bounce back is perhaps the question which we have to ask for the future. We see places which are, let's say, have accumulation of long-term structural challenges. And the question then is, how will they be affected by this succession of crises that we are seeing? I just use a very, very simple example which we have been confronted with, is the arrival of Ukrainian refugees in parts of Central and Eastern Europe. Now, the response by cities and regions has been incredible, and the willingness of municipalities and civil society groups to accommodate, to look after people has been, frankly, incredible. But what we're hearing from mayors across Europe is that this is creating an enormous challenge, not in terms just of the immediate cost, but in terms of the longer-term provision of services, housing, teaching, the infrastructure. The infrastructure is being run down at a rate because it is serving a population which is in some cases twice as big as it was intended. Now, the question there is that we can bring money. Europe can bring money. But the X factor is the resilience of these, and whether that will, in the longer term, allow them to develop, or whether it will be a break. Now, I use that as an example. I think I think that it is a question beyond the Ukraine crisis that we're seeing towards all asymmetric that we will encounter. And therefore, this balance that Philippe mentioned between this crisis response mechanism and this long-term investment thing has to be more than just instrument. It has to be part of the question about what the policy is for and how we engage and implement policies at a local and regional level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will allow myself of asking the one question to all panelists that you can decide in what sequence you would like to answer. Would you see any need for a change in the cohesion policy to ensure the bounce back effects? Bounce forward. Bounce back is not no-go. Bounce forward effects. So what's your opinion on that? Any volunteer? Please be brave, because this is the question I got from the audience in online exchange. What would you change in the cohesion policy?
No other courageous panelists, trying to tackle that. Then I will try to bring some perspectives on that. So the first thing is that cohesion works and should continue. So that's the most important. The second thing is we need to take into account and embrace the new positive aspects related to the governance and the RRF model. And I think that we need to have a very profound reflection on how to create the equilibrium in between the, it was called top-down policy. It was not intended, and that's very important. The European Parliament has actually fought valiantly in the co-decision process so that the local actors, the civil society, will be involved in the design and the implementation of the recovery and resilience plans. But let's say that it's more top-down that we usually talk about in cohesion policy. But that's exactly the kind of learning that we need to take on board. I will see. I would like to avoid to have two different strands that will not talk to each other. Let's put it this way. So one that will focus on the new lessons of governance with the recovery and resilience facility, and the other one with the cohesion policy. When we negotiated the RRF, one of the main aspects that was discussed with the Commission was how to be sure that there are going to be synergies with the cohesion policy. But given the timing and the fact that we had to rush up, we didn't take into account well enough that. And right now, basically, the cohesion remains to fix the kind of things that were not fixed by the RRF. But we didn't have an approach that had a clarity on how the two components would actually work with each other. So I would dare to say that the future of the cohesion policy needs to look into the good examples of the RRF, and we have right now in the European Parliament recently voted the first implementation report on the RRF, and I think that there are some things there that might be interesting in terms of understanding the ownership process, the fact that a lot of country-specific recommendations have been taken on board. And if we manage to have a system of conditionality and this combo of reforms and investments on one hand, and then to be sure that we are reflecting also the local perspectives and the bottom-up part, we might have one budget, not different instruments, but one budget with a common approach in terms of reforms and investments and the vision for developing European Union, and then to have basically the good things from the cohesion policy enabling bottom-up approaches and capacity building and investments, and then at the same time having these country-level reforms that are so important so that the investment at the local level makes sense. So I'm advocating right now, we have some time until the next MFF, but I'm advocating for a revamp of the cohesion policy and the economic and social governance at the EU as well, that will lead us to an integrated approach where we are not going to have one DG with one type of instruments and another DG with another type of instruments. I know that has been, this has been discussed a little bit, and I'm looking forward to see how Peter is reacting to that, for instance. But it's very, very important to be really visionary here and try to bring together that. I don't think that the cohesion policy needs to be reactive and saying, oh, the RRF people will actually try to, get on us and we are going to lose the lessons learned and the success that we had for the last decades. I don't think that's about that. I think that the cohesion policy needs to bring the bottom-up approach that we missed to put it forward because of the council position. And then the RRF needs to be much more open to local and civil society actions. And that would be the perfect design. That's my view on that, my take on that. And I'm looking forward to having a really, really efficient and integrated framework for the next financial perspective. And although my mandate and our parliament mandate ends in 2024, we would like to use the reminder, the 2 years that are coming, to try to contribute to that, to have this common vision where we can work together and use an integrated fashion the instruments that we have available. So that's my view. I don't know how you will react to that. And again, it's not to touch on the benefits of the cohesion policy, but to empower, to enhance these benefits with taking into account and the advantage of a new governance that we might put forward based on the good lessons from the RRF. Yep, that's my view.
Thank you very much. Thomas, is it also your dream and wish? RRF and cohesion policy going hand in hand, blind date, maybe the date on purpose?
Yeah, first of all, you can imagine that for the Committee of the Region, this is a core question, and we are very close to the European Parliament in the working group of Econ and the Econ Committee and the Budget Committee on the RRF. We are relatively often there. Indeed, this is the theory that it should work together. And we should not forget the regulation on the RFF is linked to cohesion. The article, the base is 174 or 175. But what I have to say, I'm German. I give you an example from Germany. The German Finance Ministry engaged the regions 3 or 4 weeks before they presented their national recovery plan for some comments. And the German Federal Chamber, the Bundesrat, took a decision that they are not at all happy with the way in a federal country where the regions are states, how they were consulted on the process. And I've been in 25 years now in regional politics, that has never happened before. The problem is the engagement is on paper. The member states have to engage, yes, they have to report about it, but there is no sanction mechanism if it is not really working. And what we see now is that there is a tendency to shift even resources from cohesion to the RFF model, and there is a big concern that it leads to more centralization. So if we really want to make it working, we really have to put more pressure on member states to properly engage, because the latest figures also show that RFF investment is doing too little to really overcoming the territorial divide and social divide. So I think, and Mr. Dombrovskis, the executive vice president, has announced that in the scoreboard they will put specific emphasis on this. And I can only call on, together with the European Economic Social Committee, but also with the Parliament, that we scrutinize it. Because the problem we see is the RFF has to be spent until 2023. Every member state will say great success. Every finance minister will say great success and give me the money, I know what to do with it. But the regions, the cities who are needing this most, they don't have this lobby for them, and the committee is too weak for that. in order to show that those who are really in need can make their voices heard. And I think that is a big problem we have in the next point. And the second point, because you said, what do we want to change for cohesion? It's difficult at the beginning of a funding period. But where we clearly see a challenge is the urban-rural divide. We have a separation of the rural development from cohesion policy, and that is a tragedy. It is also a tragedy that we are now using money for addressing the food crisis to take it from rural development and not from somewhere else, because the rural development is the link to the local people where they live, the somewheres. And if we do, and this is my personal view, but the committee will most likely go in this direction, if we are not bringing this back together, we will have a big challenge on territorial cohesion for the future.
Thank you very much. Mr. Palmieri, is social resilience new kid on the block? Is it what we want? How then to transform it into something really material, really palpable, really visible in the public policies at all levels? What was your opinion? Is it for your dream for the cohesion policy to be more resilient?
Yeah. First of all, the judgment of the cohesion policy is positive. Also because there are many analyses that show that during all this decade, the cohesion policy works and works well. Yes, there are rooms for the improvement of this policy, but about the involvement of the stakeholders in the cohesion policy compared with, for example, the recovery and resilience national plans. The involvement of the civil society in cohesion policy is much more better than in the elaboration of the national recovery and resilience plan. In every member state, this involvement was very poor. Probably the reason was also that the national plan were elaborated in very short time with many pressure, many stress, but now we have the time to rescue this time with the monitoring of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. In this way, we need a real involvement of the social partner and stakeholder. We need also monitoring tools, for example, not only indicators as the growth, but also well-being indicators. This is an important issue. I come back to the social resilience that you mentioned, because there is a positive example in Italy, not only bad example, as Professor Mazzucato said, with the reform of the public administration that cut public administration. But for example, during the pandemic crisis, Italy was one of the countries where the rate of unemployment down and not growing up. This thanks to the government measure to ban the dismissal of the employees in the enterprise during the lockdown waves. And this was very criticized from some economists, some enterprises, but this ensure the social tenure in Italy. And I think that it's real important to give this sensation to the citizen that they have a safety network for them. In this way, you can convince them to change and to give also a new transition through digital and green. And this could be a very good example. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Eugenia, a question for you as well. About the different policy instruments. You mentioned the advisory on strategies for local development. Do you feel that your leaders have enough capacity and skills to lead towards the transformation, to bounce forwards? Or do you need any assistance from the European Union, cohesion policy, or any other policy instrument? What's your personal view?
Thank you. Very good question. Actually, it's difficult to criticize own leaders, but definitely we don't have such an experience as European Union have. And that is why I mentioned this advisory assistance, because in different cases, we already had good results of such cooperation. And I think that in case of local development, we really need strong support for different regions, because the questions of spatial justice, of territorial cohesion are really urgent for Ukraine, and they were urgent even before the war. So both on national level and local level, we still need the support of European Union.
Thank you very much. Thomas, you want to add, please?
I just wanted to add something on Ukraine. We are currently, with the local government association in Ukraine, built an alliance of local regional authorities for the reconstruction of Ukraine, really pushing on a special facility for local regional development based on the ULEAD approach, which was there over the last years. And in order to not fall into the trap of just having city twinning being the solution for this reconstruction, we need a real framework for collaboration, multilateral collaboration of cities and regions with Ukrainian cities and regions to do so. And we hope that the debate on reconstruction is not only very vague in terms of, get people working together, but really have a long-term plan based on local empowerment and local engagement and local and regional collaboration.
Thank you very much. Peter, local empowerment, local and regional engagement and collaboration. Is it a melody to your ears as well as the high-level DG Regio representative? How do you see this mission-oriented, work of your structure, European Commission, DG Regio, to implement the cohesion policy? Any takeaways from this debate and the presentations before? Please.
Yes. Thank you very much, and thank you to all the different interventions. Just to say, in relation to the presentation, just to say congratulations to the colleagues from ESPON and the research team behind the first presentation, because this is precisely the type of work we need. We need to be able to think about the impact of these different asymmetries. I think that this is the most important thing. We need, as the European Union, to better anticipate these shocks and the policy responses that are needed in terms of building resilience and maintaining possibilities for different regions. Now, I just wanted to make a few reflections on the comments that have been made. In relation to what this was said, I think we fully agree with you. I think we fully agree with you. And as Thomas said, we are all operating under the heading of cohesion in the treaty. And it is, for the citizen, they don't care which instrument it comes from. It is Europe, and therefore, that should be our starting point. I think the first point to say is, the RRF, in terms of its mission, has been a great success, and its mission was a macroeconomic mission, which was to stabilize, provide comfort and confidence to the markets, and then send a signal that we were not following the path that we followed post 2008-2009 crisis, that there would be a significant public effort, and the creation at the same time of a European safe asset. It's a different funding mechanism, and I think that has been an uncontested success. I think certainly our view from our cohesion policy perspective is as been suggested, there are so many interesting elements in there. I think in particular, you highlighted the link with reform. We are increasingly involved together with our colleagues in DG Employment in the European semester, and this is the future. This is the future. And I think also the delivery mechanism that they have put in place is very interesting. There are questions about how they will deal with corruption, fraud when it emerges. I know the Court of Auditors is very interested, but you know, it is an alternative which we are very interested in. We will look at it very, very carefully and try and learn the lessons. I think, though, as you've suggested, and Victor, you pointed, there are some problems that need to be solved. And the first, of course, is the involvement of subnational level partnership. I mean, from our perspective in cohesion policy, this is not just an obligation. This is one of the great strengths of the policy. Because, you know, I know it's difficult for us to say this, but you know, not all knowledge is in the European Commission. There is knowledge in the other institutions. There is knowledge out there in Europe. And we have to have policies that are sensitive to it. I think another big issue is the distribution of the funds. We are under a cohesion heading, and I think as let's say the impact analysis hinted at, the distribution of the resources from the RRF will have a territorial impact. And we have to see, whether this is fully compatible with the cohesion objectives of harmonious development, both in terms of territories, but also in terms of social groups. Finance ministries are not always the best place to understand where different policy needs are. So that's another question. And then there's a last issue, which is, and it's perhaps just to come back to Professor Matsukato's point, is about innovation. And I had the pleasure of participating in one of her groups on when she was preparing the mission report and talking to the academics. And perhaps this is a point which has come up again, is national governments don't have a monopoly on mission and delivering and supporting missions. And in fact, I would turn it around and say that if we are going to achieve these major tasks ahead of us, these missions that we have through cohesion policy, but other EU policies as well, we need the imagination of and the innovation of the subnational level, of cities, of rural areas, particularly in relation to the green transition. So to conclude, I think that the key message that has come out of it is that irrespective of the configuration of policy in the future, we have to have a strong dimension of subnational engagement and partnership. And I think that is the starting point. And we will be delighted to continue the discussion with the Parliament, with the Committee of the Regions, notably in the context of this reflection that my Commissioner has called. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. Please remember, ESPON program is also to assist you to provide the interesting territorial observation, evidence, data, facts that feel free to use, and also feel free to entice the other DGs to the work that under the cohesion policy instrument, the ESPON program has been delivering and hopefully is going to deliver for the years to come. We have to close our debate, unfortunately. I understand there might be questions from the floor, but I presume you may still catch the panelists, at least those that are in physical presence with us during the coffee break, which comes now. So thanks a lot to our panelists. Give them the great wave of applause. And thanks everyone for being with us. Thank you.